And one of the members of that church just jumped on him for spilling that water on the carpet in the church. And the person that was carrying the water was offended by that. They didn't feel like they had really done anything wrong. The water's going to dry. It's not a big deal. But they made a bit of a judgment that this is how Adventist churches are. And that's unfair, but I can't fault them for doing that. I mean, it happened. Again, I think we just need to be careful. In our conversation, I could say something like, the SBA NAD met this week and had some discussions on the spirit of prophecy and made a ruling. Now, for somebody in the Adventist church, they understood everything I just said. But for somebody that's outside of that culture, they had no idea what I just said. What I just said was the Seventh-day Adventist Church, a part of the North Pacific Union, which is kind of the northwestern part of the United States. It's an organization and administrative body. Met, discussed some prophetic teachings that we have as a church, and made a decision based on that. Now that makes a little more sense to you. But if I just throw all these acronyms out, somebody that's a seeker that doesn't know our church or our denomination, it might as well be a foreign language. And so, again, as I speak, not just here, but when I have a 10 o'clock class or when I'm talking to somebody who's asking questions, I need to speak in English that people can understand so that they don't feel like they're an outsider, so that we can be more inclusive with that person so they understand what we're talking about. In kind of doing a little research about this topic today, it's interesting how some of these things seem so basic, but we get busy, we see a friend, we want to talk, and we forget what's going on. We want this to be a safe place where people want to ask questions, where people are feeling like it's okay to wonder and speculate about things, where they can think about what they're hearing and seeing, and ultimately find answers to those things. If we can be better listeners to what they have to say, eventually they'll ask those questions and we can help them with them. But if I'm so busy talking about all kinds of stuff to somebody that's just trying to find a little bit out about our church, I'm going to do all the talking and they're never going to get a chance to even ask those questions. So I need to be a better listener. The one thing I'm not saying is that we need to water down our truth. So don't assume that at all. The truth is truth. But there's a right time and a wrong time to share that truth. And we need to let people ask those questions. That's the right time to share that. And maybe better one-on-one than in a huge group too. Matthew 10:16 is a text that I think is great advice. Jesus is giving this advice to the disciples, I think the 70 before he sent them out. And it goes like this. I'm really kind of looking at the last part of the text, but we can read the whole thing. Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. So obviously, there's an expectation there. Hey, this may not be the most friendly of places. Be aware of your surroundings, okay? Watch the trail, okay? Make a smart choice. Be ye therefore wise as serpents, meaning, where are you? What's your surroundings? Who's standing beside you? Who's standing behind you? Who can overhear your conversation when you're talking? Be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And doves don't really do a lot of damage to people. They might do to other things. But anyway, so be harmless. Second question I'd like to throw out this morning. Is our church safe for sinners? That might seem really strange, but again, if you've ever had a traumatic experience in your life that involves sin of some kind, how did you feel right after that? I know in my life, when I've been in those types of situations, I am hypersensitive to any words that might even remotely associate with what I just did or the issue that I'm dealing with. And so whether somebody meaningfully is talking about me or just completely unrelated conversation says something like that, I hear it. And I immediately think they're talking about me. They're judging me. They don't like me. And you just start making assumptions that might not be true at all, but it's just those little trigger words because of how sensitive I am at that time, because I'm feeling guilty. And so I hear those things and it affects me real negatively. So again, I need to be careful. I don't know what's going on in all of your lives every day when I'm talking around you, and so I need to just be extremely sensitive about the things that I say when I'm at church especially, but anywhere, at work, at home, but especially here. This should be a safe place. Several years ago, and I don't even know how many, but I'm just guessing 3 or 4 years ago probably, I took a young man out to dinner one night. His family had split up, and I think he was needing to spend some time with a guy. And so I tried to take it upon myself to do something with him at least once in a while. And so I said, hey, let's go out to dinner tonight at Louis, just down the street here. And so I picked him up and we went to dinner. And we had a great dinner. We were probably halfway, 3/4 away. Maybe we were done with our meal. I don't remember because it was a while ago. And we were just talking, and believe me, nothing in our conversation was derogatory or, colored in any way. I mean, we were just having a conversation about school and what's going on and how are you doing at home and how's mom and just stuff like that. And kind of out of the corner of my eye, I noticed that a couple was sitting at another table over here, and they got up to leave, and they walked right by our table, and as the woman got right beside me, she looked down at me and she said, you should be ashamed of yourself. Oh. And then she walked on by.
Oh, boy.
And this guy and I just looked at each other and watched this couple, and we're thinking, what happened? I was in shock. I could not speak for a minute. It's like, what happened? And I still to this day don't know what happened.
You should have went and got her.
All I can do is assume, which is dangerous, but she must have heard a couple of words or thought she heard a couple of words that she totally misunderstood and then put the rest of the pieces together in her mind and then dumped on me. And honestly, I mean, we were not doing anything wrong or inappropriate at all. So I don't know where that came from. But it's someone hearing what they think they heard and acting upon that. And not even close. I mentioned, a sin in your life. Someone feeling maybe guilty or maybe ashamed or maybe, I don't know, you fill in the blank there, but a feeling of some kind because of something that they've done. And as people, we sometimes are really quick to put labels on people. Oh, you're an adulterer. Oh, you're a drunk. You're a smoker. Oh, you eat too much. Oh, you don't eat enough. I mean, on and on and on. We like to put labels on people, and so we just kind of put them in a cubbyhole or in a pen, because it's easier for us to deal with them that way. And I was reading something along the lines of labeling people this week, and there was a little phrase in there that just really caught my attention, and I thought fit well with my topic today. And it goes like this, and I'm going to read it so I don't leave out any of the important words. We can do that, and they used a little different visual rather than that, but they were talking about sheep and putting them into pens and stuff like that, different kinds of sheep, different colors, different ages, whatever. But and so we can do that. We can label people, or we can build a beautiful well together and come gather there to drink and be refreshed and sustained. Doesn't that have a nice mental picture to it? Instead of being divisive and labeling everybody about this and that and the other thing that they might do, it's like, let's do something together. Let's be inclusive, okay? and do something that we can all gain a blessing out of? We're not the judges, fortunately, because I would probably enjoy it for a while, but do a pathetic job of it. I mean, I'm really thankful that you're not my judge, and I love you all. I'm really glad you're not my judge and that God is. There's a couple of texts I just want to share with you, and one was really interesting. I don't know that I've seen it before, but the first one is Psalms 135:14. And this is just confirming, God is the judge. For the Lord will give justice to his people and will have compassion on his servants. And I think that's why God is judge and not me, because I don't have that compassion. I mean, I just said I love you, but I don't have the kind of love that God has to not overlook, but he can provide that healing. And he saved us. And he is our judge, and he has a right to be that judge. But I'm not. I need to leave that to God. The other text is Zechariah 7:9. And I've probably seen this text before, but I've not, thought about it like this. This is what the Lord of Heaven's army says. So this is what God says. Judge fairly. Show mercy and kindness to one another. In a different version it says, execute true justice, which is to show mercy and compassion, everyone to his brother. I like that. God is saying what real justice is showing mercy to people. Not judging them, showing mercy to people, helping them feel accepted and not condemned for what they've done. Okay, third question. And this is my final question, but I've got a few more comments after that. Third question. Is this place, is our church, is the experience a safe place for our pastor? And we just finished October Pastor Appreciation Month. But is this a safe place for our pastor? Well, you might say, hey, we pay the guy. I mean, he ought to be able to take it. I mean, I don't always agree with what he says, right? I don't like the way he says it sometimes. I don't like the color of his shirt some days, to be honest with you. And I really don't like the tie that he wears once in a while. I don't like this, and I don't like this, and I don't like that. And when I hear something like that, I think the I part of that is what has the problem, not the pastor. When I was growing up, my mom used to tell me something, and she told me this a lot, and it used to irritate me. But she'd say, maybe you heard it as a kid or still, but my mom would tell me, Ed, if you don't have something nice to say, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And it used to just bother me, because I probably was saying things that were, not appropriate. But the older I get, the more wisdom I see in that. So, for people that are critical, not just of our pastor, but any pastor, the way to rationalize that in your head to feel better about it is, well, I'm not criticizing, I'm not being critical, I'm not condemning him, I'm providing feedback. That's a good thing, right? Feedback's a good thing. But if you do know anything about communication and feedback, there's a right and a wrong way to give feedback too. Especially if someone is, I'm going to say, somewhat superior to you. I mean, our pastor is the leader of our church. And I'm not just talking about Anthony. I'm talking about any church you might go to, any pastor you've had. I'm not trying to say pastors are perfect, but they are called to do something. And they're serving God. And they're supposed to be our leaders. And so I think, first of all, even if we do have a disagreement with the pastor, we should provide that feedback in a respectful way and not in a critical way. But I have employees and I give feedback to them. It's part of my job. But part of the feedback process is I tell them a lot of the things that they're doing really, really well, too. And then I explain a couple things that we need to change some behavior in or improve in. That's what feedback is. It's not just being critical and dump it on somebody and then run it off. about that very thought, I'm thinking, if you remember the story in the Bible of Jesus, he meets this woman is kind of thrown in front of him, I think. She'd been caught with somebody that wasn't her husband. And the Jewish law said we could pick up rocks and throw them at her until she was dead. That's the judgment, that's the law, that's the rule. And so these religious leaders are saying to Jesus, isn't that what the law says? So let's pick up a rock and throw them at her and kill her. And Jesus didn't argue with them about the law, because it was law. He just started writing in the sand, in the dust, all of the sins of the people that had a rock in their hand. And, if I was one of those guys, when I saw some of the sins I had done, maybe even just that day, I dropped my rock and walked away. And I'm thinking the next time I want to criticize Anthony or another pastor or anybody in a leadership role in a church like that, I need to think about the pile of food that I've got in my back pocket first, rather than just feel like I need to be critical. There's another issue I think that comes up too, and that is theology, a difference in theology versus style or personality or something like that. And I know when I was younger, I used to want it my way and felt like that was the right way and the only way. But that's not the case. I think about Cindy and I. We've been married for a long time, so it's not like we're just getting acquainted or anything. But we both love to cook. And I'll decide on a certain dish that I want to make, and I'll find a recipe that I like, and I'll make that recipe. And I've got the finished product. Cindy goes about that a little bit differently. She looks at 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 or 20 recipes on Pinterest, and half a dozen that she likes, and then kind of puts them all away and makes whatever she was thinking about making, and it turns out great. When I'm cooking, I am mixing things and creating things and chopping and cutting and doing all that kind of stuff, and as I get done with a tool or something in the kitchen, I'll kind of rinse it off or clean it and throw it in the dishwasher or put it back away. When I get done making whatever I'm making, the kitchen is pretty clean.
Well, not you, huh?
She gets out all the cooking toys. She loves cooking toys. And the kitchen is not a mess, but there's a lot of things on the counter when she gets done cooking. Things sold, the counter still got stuff all over it. And then she cleans up the kitchen. Is one way right and one way wrong?
Yes, your way's right.
Always right.
5 years ago, I thought, you're right. My way is right. And what's the matter with you? But I am trying. I'm working on that. Not that I'm perfect, but I'm trying to get better and better about understanding that it's not right and wrong. It's my way, and it's your way, and it's your way, and they're all right. If we're not talking about a theological issue that's right or wrong, I mean, your way and my way is okay. Ray can do it one way, and he washes his car one way, and I wash my car a different way, and they both end up clean. Okay. And so I'm thinking we need to take the personality differences out of our desire and burden to provide feedback to somebody, and be accepting of the fact that different styles are okay. It's what makes life fun. I mean, think about it for a second. If we were all identical, little robots, R2-D2 or whatever,
boring.
Whatever. Yeah, I mean, it would not be fun. We'd get bored really fast. We need to be nurturing and helpful and supportive of our pastor. Do we make his job easier, or do we make it harder? One last text I want to share with you, Ephesians 4:31 and 32. Get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, harsh words, and slander, as well as all types of evil behavior. Instead, be kind to each other, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, just as God, through Christ, has forgiven you. I think if we have a spirit of tender-heartedness, remembering that Jesus died for me as well as the person I'm talking to, I think we might be in a better frame of mind to provide feedback, if we want to call it that. It's interesting that when Jesus was on this earth for a few years, the thing that he got slammed for the most, what he always got in trouble for, was who he hung out with. It wasn't usually his theology. It was who he hung out with. And think about it. Who did he spend time with? If you look in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they're full of stories of Jesus spending time with tax collectors. Now you might think, well, IRS agent. He had a good job. So back in those days, the IRS agent said, give me $1. And then he paid 50 cents of that to whoever the king was, and he kept 50 cents of every dollar he collected. So he would squeeze, this poor guy slaved away, and I would squeeze him as a tax collector for every penny I thought he could pay and then some. So not a good job. So the religious leaders at the time didn't like that Jesus was spending time with tax collectors or prostitutes, or that there might have been wine at the dinners, or this or that or the other thing. They had a problem, and yet that's who Jesus hung out with. Were some of the people that really needed help. A safe church is really reaching people in a Christ-like way. And how did Jesus do that? He was meek. He was humble. He showed mercy and grace. If you were in our discussion class this morning at 10 o'clock, you heard Jack talk about this, and I complimented Jack on his discussion this morning and how well it fit into my talk today. And it's amazing, and because Cindy asked me, she said, did you tell Jack what you were talking about? I said, no, I didn't tell Jack anything. And when I mentioned it to Jack, he goes, yeah, God knows what's going on. So I got this email this week on Tuesday, and I'm going to define a couple things because I just said don't use acronyms. So our church, the Adventist church, has different levels of organization, just administrative stuff to make sure everything runs smoothly and to kind of keep everybody on track. And so we have what's called North America Division, which is Canada and the United States, North America, from your grade school geometry or classes. So anyway, this email came from, geography, sorry. I'm a math guy. This email came from the North American Division Executive Committee, and the president of the North American Division, or the NAD, is a guy named Daniel Jackson. And in our church, in our denomination right now, there's a really hot topic about the ordination of women. And we're not going to talk about that because we'd be here for a week. It is what it is. But our church has been discussing this for the last several years and is going to be discussing it for at least another year and then trying to make a decision about it. And obviously, because of this memo that came out, the conversation has been heated. That's probably a nice way to say that there's been some angry words said by both sides about this issue. And so the executive committee of the North American Division got together, and the title of this email says, Delegates Vote Statement on Civil Discourse. Civil discourse is basically how to have a conversation in public. Okay, how to have a discussion. And they listed 4 rules here, which are all good, and I'm not going to read them to you, but Jackson prefaces this memo with this little phrase. I don't think it's part of our mission, meaning the mission of the Adventist church, to start attacking each other just because we don't agree. Fair statement, I'd say. Probably a pretty insightful and smart statement. And like I said, I'm not going to read these 4 bullet points, these rules that they want to have followed. But let me just say that it talks about not just how I'm going to talk with Caleb, but how I'm going to email Caleb, how I'm going to post on my Facebook page, if I had one, how I'm going to blog, how I'm going to tweet, it's talking about a lot of different ways to communicate and saying, okay, folks, you need to pay attention to how you deal with this, and here's the rules. And to sum this up, here's the statement at the end. It says, we, meaning that executive committee and all the delegates that they're expecting to follow this, says, we therefore resolve to avoid participating in or being party to all forms of unhealthy and demeaning discourse. Our aim is to govern our communication according to the high standards of Christian conduct found in the guidelines of this statement. And then here's the clincher. So that God may be glorified in all we say and do. That's the bottom line. That's the bottom line. So I've got a couple of suggestions. Because this is a problem for me sometimes, especially when something triggers something, maybe. It's been a stressful week at work. I might be able to justify, well, I can say whatever I want then. That's not the case. I need to be aware of it all the time. So, first suggestion is know the terrain. When I'm mountain biking, pay attention. If I know I'm coming up on something that's a little bit dicey, be careful. When I come to church here at the Experience, I know some of the people that are going to be here, but I don't know some of the other people that are going to be here. But I know we have guests here every Saturday. Okay, I know that. Without fail, we have guests here every Saturday. So I know there's going to be at least one person, and usually many people, that I don't know here. And so how I speak when I'm talking to anybody, including my wife, needs to be appropriate so that nobody overhears anything and some lady doesn't say to me, like in the restaurant when she walks out of this church, I would feel devastated if that happened to me at this church. Even if it was totally misunderstood like it was at the restaurant that night, I would feel terrible because somebody was hurt and is leaving. I need to be prepared to encounter the seekers and the sinners in this building, right? I mean, after all, we're here, so we know there's sinners here. Everybody has sinned, okay? I need to guard my words and my opinions. And my opinions. And it doesn't mean that opinions aren't valuable and valid. But if I don't really know well who I'm talking to and share an opinion without them asking for it, it could be extremely hurtful. So I need to guard my opinions. I need to think about what I'm saying. Would I like it said to me? Would I like everybody to know what I had just said to somebody? If it was broadcast on the PA system? I need to think about that. Would that make me comfortable or would that make me nervous? It might make me nervous, right? Basically, I need to be sensitive to other people's feelings. And I need to try to be full of grace and be Christ-like. I don't know if I said this at the beginning, but my talk today is really out of love for this church. Lee and I have been members here for 10 years, beyond 10 years, because we were meeting kind of before we officially started. So this is my home church. I love this church. I love the people in this church. And I'm excited about guests that come in and are just kicking the tires to see what the experience is like, or they just stumbled into the door or something like that. And maybe it's a little bit selfish, but I want them to feel like it was a good place to be while they were here for only a few hours. They're going to make a judgment about this church and maybe even me based on just seeing me for 2 hours. And I want it to be a good impression because we're talking about eternal things. Last Sabbath I mentioned eternal things, not just stuff that's going to last for a day or two, but eternal things. It's important. So I hope that some of the things that I've shared with you this morning are kind of like little sticky notes, little yellow sticky notes that you can put on your fridge or on your mirror so that you're reminded, I need to act this way, I need to be this way, I need to, and I'm not saying put on a mask and don't be yourself. I'm just saying be careful. I think that together and individually we can help to make sure that this place remains a safe place for anybody and everybody to be. So when you're out on the trail, pay attention to where you're going, think ahead, be safe, use the right etiquette, and have fun. Does that make sense? That's my thoughts for today. So think we have